So the first thing you might think about is just what happens if you don't pay a bill? Like really don't pay it, right? I mean when it first comes in it's only the size of a kitten, but if you leave it alone for 2 or 3 years it pretty much grows into a full-fledged dragon. Why? Well, because things that you ignore have a life of their own, a complex life, like a bill. A bill is attached to a whole industrial complex, right? One of whose major functions is to make sure that you pay the bill. And if you don't pay the bill, then you immediately find out what it's connected to. It's connected to something immense and very troublesome, and if you allow the full force of that thing to manifest itself, it's not pretty. So one lesson from this story is that if something's nagging at you just a bit, it's probably better to deal with it before it turns into a full-fledged dragon. And then you might think, well, what if it's already a full-fledged dragon, right? I mean, then what's your option? Is there nothing left but to run away? And so then I can tell you what we know from 50 years of studying the outcome of clinical psychological interventions. So let's take an extreme case, right? Let's say something truly terrible has happened to you, and as a consequence of that you're in shock, post-traumatic shock, which is a condition that's sufficiently serious to damage your brain over time. I mean, it's not only a psychological disorder, it's a physical disorder. If you're really stressed, your cortisol levels shoot up, and if your cortisol levels shoot up, that cortisol in high doses is a neurotoxin, it starts to damage your brain. So let's take a very extreme case and imagine that you've been violently sexually assaulted, and as a consequence of that you're in post-traumatic shock. How do you get cured? So that means you can't really go outside, you certainly can't encounter anything that's associated with the event. Your sense of integrity and personal safety has been completely destroyed. Is there any way you can get back on your feet? Now there's a woman named Edna Foa in New York, I think one of the world's top clinical psychologists, and she's been dealing with women who have post-traumatic stress disorder for decades. And she's found a treatment that works. And the treatment is this. She has the women relive the event in as much detail as possible, over and over in their imagination, with the accompanying emotion. And she's found, because she's done physiological measurements on her clients, that those women that allow themselves to get the most fully upset as a consequence of the reliving get better faster and stay better longer. Like, the clinical evidence is absolutely clear. When you take someone to therapy, you're basically doing two things to them. Well, three. You allow them to confess what's wrong with them, because it's really useful to actually say what it is that's bothering you. It makes it clear and distinct. You help the person get their story straight, because you have to have your story straight, right? You have to know where you're coming from, and you have to know where you're going, because otherwise there's no structure for your life. And the third thing is, if your path from point A to B is being blocked by something that you're afraid of, you better learn to confront it, because if you don't, it will grow and expand until it turns into the kind of dragon that occupies your whole house.